The email landed in her inbox with a soft digital chime, a sound that felt less like a notification and more like a final judgment. Its subject line was painfully neutral: Q4 performance bonus payouts. But for Rachel, this wasn't just an email. It was the finish line. The validation for 6 months of sleepless nights, sacrificed weekends, and a level of strategic maneuvering that would make a chess grandmaster proud. She had done the impossible. She had landed the Innovatech account, $8 million, an annual recurring contract that single-handedly smashed every target her department had for the entire year. Her director, Mark, had promised her a $40,000 bonus. He'd shaken her hand, his smile wary and insincere, and said, "You deliver this, Rachel, and you'll get the biggest bonus of your life." She had delivered. Now it was time for the company to do the same. Rachel's heart hammered against her ribs as she clicked the email. Her eyes scanned past the corporate jargon, the rah-rah message from the CEO, and went straight to the attached PDF. Her payroll number, her name, and then the box labeled performance bonus. The number inside was a perfect soul-crushing oval, 0. For a moment, she thought it was a mistake, a typo, a system glitch. It had to be. Companies don't just forget a $40,000 bonus tied to an $8 million deal. She took a deep breath, printed the statement, and walked the 30 paces to Mark's glass-walled office. The walk felt like miles. Every head that turned to watch her felt like an accusation. Mark was on the phone, laughing loudly while scrolling through something on his tablet. He gestured for her to come in, covering the mouthpiece. "Rachel, great news, I hope!" He boomed, his voice dripping with false enthusiasm. She closed the door behind her, the soft click echoing in the suddenly silent room. She laid the paper on his desk, her finger pointing directly at the 0. "Mark, there seems to be a mistake with my bonus." He ended his call without a goodbye. He picked up the paper, glanced at it for less than a second, and tossed it back on the desk. That. No mistake, Rachel. We had to make some tough decisions this quarter." The air left Rachel's lungs. "Tough decisions? Mark, we signed Innovatech. $8 million. You personally promised me a $40,000 bonus. We have it in emails." Mark leaned back in his leather chair, steepling his fingers. He looked at her not with sympathy, but with a kind of smug pity. "Look, Rachel, things changed. The board decided on a company-wide bonus freeze for non-executives to shore up our Q1 budget. It's out of my hands. Unfortunate timing, I know." "Unfortunate timing?" Rachel's voice was dangerously low. "You're telling me the company is using the $8 million deal I brought in to shore up the budget, and the person who brought it in gets nothing, while I'm sure the executive bonuses were paid out just fine." A flicker of annoyance crossed Mark's face. He clearly wasn't used to being challenged. "That's above your pay grade. You got your commission, which is more than generous. You should be a team player and understand the bigger picture. We all have to make sacrifices." The word sacrifice hung in the air, thick and insulting. Rachel had sacrificed her time, her energy, her social life. He had sacrificed nothing. He had taken the credit for her deal in the executive meeting. She knew that for a fact. He had gotten his bonus. She stared at him, at his perfectly coiffed hair, his expensive watch, the self-satisfied smirk playing on his lips. And in that moment, something inside her shifted. The shock and disappointment hardened into a cold, diamond-hard resolve. He didn't see her as a person who had earned something. He saw her as a resource that had been fully exploited. He thought this was the end of the conversation. He had no idea it was the beginning of his nightmare. "I understand the picture perfectly, Mark," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. She picked up the paper from his desk, folded it neatly, and slid it into her pocket. "Thank you for clarifying." She turned and walked out of his office, her back straight, her steps measured. Mark had made a $40,000 miscalculation. She was about to show him what an $8 million mistake looked like. Rachel didn't go back to her desk. She walked straight to the elevator, rode it down to the lobby, and walked out into the cold city air. She didn't rage, she didn't cry. She walked. For blocks and blocks, she let the rhythmic sound of her heels on the pavement sync with the gears turning in her mind. Mark's words echoed in her head. Team player. Bigger picture. Sacrifices. It was all corporate code for we have the power, and you don't. They believed she was just a cog in their machine, easily replaceable. They forgot one crucial detail. The client hadn't signed with a faceless corporation. They had signed with her. Mr. Sterling, the CEO of Innovatech, was a notoriously difficult man to win over. He was old school, valuing relationships and trust above all else. During their months of negotiations, he hadn't cared about her company's glossy brochures or their bloated marketing presentations. He had cared about Rachel's meticulous analysis, her 24/7 availability, and her uncanny ability to anticipate his needs before he even voiced them. The $8 million deal was built on a foundation of her personal credibility. Her company had just provided the letterhead. That night, Rachel didn't sleep. Instead, she sat at her dining room table, her laptop open, a pot of coffee brewing. She wasn't just angry anymore. She was methodical. She was building a case. She pulled up every email exchange with Mark, where the $40,000 bonus was mentioned, saving them to a secure personal drive. She reviewed her employment contract, highlighting the vague clauses about discretionary bonuses. They had covered their legal bases, but they had left a gaping hole in their business sense. Then, she switched gears. She began researching how to start a consulting firm, LLC registration in her state, business insurance, professional liability. She sketched out a business plan on a legal pad, her handwriting sharp and decisive. The business model was simple, provided the same elite-level account management she was already doing, but as an independent contractor, lower overhead for the client, higher profit margin for her. It was a win-win for everyone except her current employer. She needed a name, something that sounded strong, reliable, and a little bit ruthless. She landed on Apex Strategic Partners. It sounded established. It sounded expensive. The biggest piece of the puzzle was, of course, Innovatech. She couldn't just call Mr. Sterling and complain about her bonus. That would be unprofessional and petty. She had to frame this not as her problem, but as his. The company's decision to stiff her on the bonus wasn't just a betrayal, it was a symptom of a much larger disease. It was a sign of mismanagement, a sign that the company was prioritizing short-term budget fixes, overvaluing the very people responsible for its biggest successes. A company that unstable and short-sighted was a risk to its clients. Her plan began to crystallize. It was audacious. It was terrifying. But it was brilliant. She would not poach the client. That would be a breach of contract. Instead, she would simply inform the client of the situation, framed in the language of corporate risk and instability. She would present herself as the stable alternative. By 4 in the morning, the coffee was gone, and a detailed, step-by-step plan lay on her table. Step 1. Form the LLC. Step 2. Build a simple but professional website. Step 3. Draft a resignation letter. Step 4. Schedule a transition meeting with Mr. Sterling. And Step 5. Watch it all burn down. She looked at her reflection in the dark screen of her laptop. The tired, defeated woman who had walked out of Mark's office was gone. In her place was a strategist, an architect of her own future. They had tried to take $40,000 from her. She was about to take $8 million from them. This wasn't about the money anymore. This was about respect, and she was about to teach them its true cost. The next 2 weeks at the office were an exercise in masterful deception. Rachel performed her duties with chilling efficiency. She was polite, professional, and completely opaque. She answered emails promptly, joined meetings, and offered strategic insights, all while her new company, Apex Strategic Partners, was being born in the quiet hours of the night. She filed the LLC paperwork online during her lunch break. She used a simple web builder to create a sleek, minimalist website that screamed competence and exclusivity. She opened a business bank account, Each completed task was a small, satisfying click in the lock of Mark's impending doom. Her colleagues noticed the change. Her usual friendly demeanor was replaced by a cool, focused detachment. They chalked it up to burnout after the massive Innovatech deal. She needs a vacation, one whispered to another by the coffee machine. Mark, in his arrogance, saw it as her sulking. He'd occasionally walk by her desk with a smug look, as if to say, "See, you need us more than we need you." He had no idea she was a Trojan horse counting down the minutes until the gates were opened. On the final day of the second week, she printed her resignation letter. It was a masterpiece of corporate neutrality. It mentioned a new opportunity and thanked the company for the experience. It was short, cold, and offered no room for negotiation. She walked to Mark's office for the second time in 2 weeks. This time, there was no anxiety, only a serene sense of purpose. She didn't wait for him to finish his call. She placed the letter squarely in the middle of his desk. He stopped talking and read it. His face went through a rapid series of emotions: confusion, then annoyance, and finally, condescending amusement. "Rachel, Rachel, Rachel," he said, shaking his head as he hung up the phone. "Don't be rash. You're emotional because of the bonus. I get it. But don't throw away a great career over one little setback. Where are you even going to go?" "I'm pursuing an opportunity that better aligns with my professional values," she said, quoting a line directly from a corporate memo he himself had sent out last month. The smugness returned. "Fine, but you know your non-compete is ironclad. You can't touch any of our clients for 12 months, especially not Innovatech." He said their name as if it were his personal property. "I am fully aware of my contractual obligations," Rachel replied, her voice as calm as a frozen lake. "My last day will be in 2 weeks." She turned to leave. "You'll be back," he called after her. "They always come back." Rachel just smiled to herself. He was still playing checkers, while she had just declared checkmate in a game he didn't even know they were playing. The key to her entire plan was the final transition call with Mr. Sterling from Innovatech. She scheduled it for her very last day in the office. It was perfectly legitimate. She had to introduce the new account manager who would be taking over for her. The person Mark had assigned was a junior employee named Kevin, who was competent but completely unprepared for a client of Sterling's caliber. Mark had done it to save money, another fatal miscalculation. The day arrived. Rachel, Mark, and a nervous-looking Kevin gathered in the main conference room for the video call. Mr. Sterling appeared on the large screen, his expression as stern as ever. "Rachel," he grunted in greeting, "I was surprised to hear you were leaving. You're the reason we signed this deal." This was her opening. "Thank you, Mr. Sterling. It was a pleasure working with you," she began, her voice steady and professional. "I wanted to personally introduce you to Kevin, who will be your new point of contact. I'm leaving the company due to a significant internal restructuring. There's been a shift in their values that has led to instability, and frankly, I no longer feel it's an environment where I can guarantee my clients the level of service and stability they deserve." Mark's face went rigid. This wasn't the script. She hadn't bad-mouthed anyone, but she had planted a seed of doubt. Instability, restructuring. These were red flag words for a CEO like Sterling. "Instability?" Sterling asked, his eyes narrowing on the screen. "Elaborate." "I can't go into specifics out of professional courtesy," Rachel said, which was far more damning than any accusation. "But let's just say the company's short-term financial priorities have begun to conflict with its commitment to rewarding the talent that secures its largest accounts. It makes one question their long-term vision." She then turned to Kevin. "But I'm sure Kevin will do a fine job." The compliment was a dagger. It highlighted his inexperience. Mr. Sterling wasn't looking at Kevin. He was looking at Rachel. He was a shark who had just smelled a drop of blood in the waters. He understood the subtext perfectly. The company was in turmoil. The star player was leaving. They were replacing her with a rookie. The rest of the call was a formality. When it ended, Mark was seething. "What was that? You practically told him we were sinking!" Rachel simply gathered her notes. "I told him the truth, framed in a way he would understand. I have a contractual duty not to harm the company. I also have a moral duty not to mislead a client who placed his trust in me. Goodbye, Mark." She walked out of the conference room. leaving Mark and a terrified-looking Kevin in her wake. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was an email from Mr. Sterling's personal account. The subject, urgent. The message, Rachel, call me on my private cell in 1 hour. We need to talk about my company's stability. Rachel walked out of the building for the last time, her personal effects in a small box. She didn't look back. She went to a quiet coffee shop a few blocks away, ordered a black coffee, and sat down at a small table by the window. She was no longer an employee. She was the CEO of Apex Strategic Partners, a company with 0 clients and 0 revenue. But she had a feeling that was about to change. Exactly 1 hour later, her phone rang. The caller ID showed a blocked number. She took a deep breath and answered. "This is Rachel." "Rachel, it's David Sterling," the familiar gruff voice said. "Let's dispense with the pleasantries. What the hell is going on over there? You don't leave a company right after landing an $8 million deal unless something is fundamentally broken." This was the moment of truth. She had to play it perfectly. "Mr. Sterling, as I said, I can't speak ill of my former employer. It wouldn't be professional." "Cut the corporate nonsense, Rachel," he snapped. "I'm not their client anymore if you're not there. I signed on with you. The company was incidental. They put a rookie on my multi-million-dollar account. They let their #1 asset walk out the door. You used the word instability. To me, that means my investment is at risk. So tell me what I need to know." Rachel chose her words with surgical precision. "The company made it clear that they did not value the work that went into securing our partnership. They implemented a new financial strategy that essentially penalizes high performance in favor of short-term cost-cutting. They broke a significant promise to me after the Innovatech deal was signed. It showed me that the company's leadership is erratic and, in my opinion, unreliable. A company that doesn't keep its promises to its own people is not a company that can be trusted to keep its promises to its clients in the long run." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Rachel could hear him breathing, thinking. She had laid out the facts without emotion. She hadn't mentioned the bonus. She had framed her personal grievance as a catastrophic business risk for him. "So where are you going?" Sterling finally asked. "I've started my own strategic consulting firm," she said calmly. "Apex Strategic Partners. I'm going to do what I do best, but on my own terms." Another pause. Longer this time. "And I suppose you're aware of the non-compete clause in your contract," he said. It wasn't a question. It was a test. "I am," Rachel confirmed. "It prevents me from soliciting business from any of their clients for 12 months. "That's right," Sterling said, and Rachel could almost hear the smile in his voice. "It prevents you from soliciting me. It says nothing, however, about me firing them and soliciting you. A contract is a two-way street, Rachel. They broke their end of the bargain with you, which demonstrated bad faith. In my book, that makes them an unreliable partner. I'm invoking the 30-day termination clause in our contract, citing concerns over account management stability." Rachel's coffee sat untouched, growing cold. Her knuckles were white as she gripped her phone. It was happening. It was actually happening. "Send me a proposal for Apex Strategic Partners to take over the Innovatech account, effective in 31 days, Sterling commanded. "I want the exact same level of service you were providing before, and Rachel, double your fee. A company that doesn't value its people is a company I don't want to do business with. I, on the other hand, pay for talent." Tears pricked at the corners of Rachel's eyes, but she willed them away. This was no time for emotion. This was a time for business. "I'll have a proposal in your inbox by the end of the day, Mr. Sterling." "Good," he grunted. "Welcome to the big leagues, kid." He hung up. Rachel sat there for a full minute, the phone still pressed to her ear. She had done it. She had turned their greed and disrespect into the foundation of her own empire. She took a slow sip of her now cold coffee. It was the sweetest, most satisfying drink she had ever tasted. The war wasn't over, but she had just won the decisive battle. Now, all she had to do was wait for the fallout. The email from Innovatech's legal department arrived in Mark's inbox on a Tuesday morning at exactly 9:01 a.m. It was not addressed to him, but to the company's CEO, with Mark and the entire legal team CC'd. The subject line was brutally direct: Notice of contract termination. Mark, who was in the middle of telling a junior associate to reformat a pointless presentation, saw the notification pop up on his screen. He clicked on it casually, expecting a routine inquiry. His face went from pink to white to a blotchy, horrified red in the space of about 15 seconds. The blood drained from his head so fast he felt dizzy. The language was cold, corporate, and utterly devastating. Exercising our right to terminate the agreement as per Section 7.3 effective in 30 days. Due to significant concerns regarding account management continuity and perceived internal instability, we no longer have confidence in your firm's ability to manage our strategic needs. $8 million vanished. A sound escaped Mark's throat, a strangled gasp that made the junior associate jump. Then, Mark's office phone began to ring, a shrill, piercing sound. It was the CEO's extension. He looked at the phone as if it were a dangerous animal. Then his cell phone started vibrating violently on his desk. It was the head of sales. The shockwave radiated outwards from his office. Whispers turned into frantic messages on the company's internal chat. Did you hear about Innovatech? They're pulling the account. Mark looks like he's seen a ghost. Mark's world was collapsing in real time. He was summoned to the CEO's office on the top floor. It wasn't a conversation, it was a verdict. How did this happen, Mark? The CEO asked, his voice dangerously calm. It was Rachel, Mark stammered. She left. She must have poached them. It's a clear violation of her non-compete. I just got off the phone with David Sterling myself, the CEO said, his voice dropping to an icy whisper. He was very clear. We weren't fired because Rachel left. We were fired because we were stupid enough to let her leave, and he said our decision not to pay her bonus for landing the biggest deal in this company's history showed a catastrophic lack of business judgment. He has lost all faith in our leadership, in your leadership. The truth hit Mark like a physical blow. It wasn't a legal issue, it was a respect issue. They hadn't just lost an account. They had been judged and found wanting by a client who mattered. Meanwhile, Rachel was sitting in her newly rented desk at a quiet co-working space. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from Sarah, a former colleague and friend from the old office. OMG! Rachel, what did you do? The whole office is in meltdown. Innovatech pulled the plug. Mark just got called up to the CEO. People are saying he's going to be fired. This is insane. Rachel smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile, and she typed back a simple reply. They made a $40,000 business decision. I made an $8 million one. She minimized the chat window and opened up a new document. It was a contract between Apex Strategic Partners and Innovatech. She typed in the service fee, the number David Sterling had told her to use. The figure was so large it looked like a typo. It represented more money than she had ever thought she would make in a year. And this was just for one client. She hit save and attached the document to a new email. As she sent it, a sense of profound calm washed over her. It wasn't just about the money, it was the validation, it was the justice. She hadn't just won, she had rewritten the entire game. Her old company had played by a rulebook that said employees were disposable. She had just proven that the most valuable asset in any company isn't its brand or its balance sheet. It's the talent. And they had let their most valuable asset walk right out the door and become their biggest competitor. 3 months later, the dust had settled, leaving behind a completely new landscape. Apex Strategic Partners was no longer just Rachel and a laptop. It was a small, thriving consultancy. She had leased a modest but stylish office downtown and had just hired her first employee, Sarah, the friend who had texted her on the day of the meltdown. Her old company had laid Sarah off in the restructuring that followed the Innovatech disaster. Rachel was more than happy to hire her. The Innovatech account was running smoother than ever. Without the layers of corporate bureaucracy, Rachel was more agile, more responsive. David Sterling was ecstatic. He had even referred 2 other major clients to her. Apex Strategic Partners was on track to bill $10 million in its first year. As for her old company, the news that trickled back to her was grim. Mark had, in fact, been fired. Not with a severance package, but with a for-cause termination due to gross mismanagement. His career was in tatters. The loss of the $8 million account had triggered a cascade of failures. It spooked investors, caused their stock to dip, and led to a company-wide budget crisis that was far worse than the one they had tried to prevent by withholding bonuses. The irony was almost poetic. In their attempt to save $40,000, they had inflicted a wound on themselves that would cost them tens of millions in the long run. One afternoon, Rachel was looking out her new office window, watching the city buzz with life below. Her phone chimed. It was a professional networking notification. Mark had updated his profile. His new title was consultant, seeking new opportunities. He was unemployed. She felt a brief, fleeting moment of something that wasn't quite pity, but a sort of grim satisfaction. He hadn't seen her. He had seen a line on a spreadsheet, a cost he could cut, and it had cost him everything. Rachel had learned the most valuable lesson of her career. Her worth wasn't determined by a title or a bonus figure on a piece of paper. It was determined by the value she created. They had tried to make her feel small, interchangeable, and powerless, but they had forgotten that power isn't just about the title on the door. It's about the relationships you build and the trust you earn. She had built an empire not out of spite, but out of self-respect. Her story wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclamation. She had reclaimed her career, her future, and her own sense of worth. The $40,000 bonus they had refused to pay her felt like a distant memory, a tiny pebble that had started an avalanche. She had more than made up for it, and more importantly, she had built something that was entirely her own. She was no longer a team player in someone else's game. She was the one who owned the entire stadium. Rachel's story is a powerful reminder to always know your worth and to never let anyone else define it for you. The most successful people aren't just the ones who work hard. They're the ones who refuse to be undervalued. If this story of corporate justice resonated with you and you want to see more content like it, please take a moment to support the channel. It makes a huge difference. Go ahead and hit that like button and make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next story. And for our question of the day, we'd love to know where you're watching from and how old you are. Let us know in the comments below. What city are you from and what's your age? Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.